Hello and welcome to the latest episode of Cotunkit Chronicles, which has been broadcast and developed here in the island of Cotunkit in our studio. We acknowledge the custodians of the land where we are broadcasting from today, including the Narragansett Nation, and we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. I'm your host, James Allen, and I'm joined here most weeks, and this week by the extraordinary adventurer, extreme sport enthusiast, and all-around great gal, Ashlyn Komoric. Hello, Ashlyn, and welcome back to the studio.
Why are you welcoming me back? I secured this studio for us.
But I did something, didn't I?
You show up on time, even early most times like today. Stand outside the door. That's about it.
It kind of stings a little bit, doesn't it?
I'm not a bed of roses, and there are definitely some thorns.
You're mad that I can't work at Motherboard and figure out how to review the podcast on my computer. In fact, I've been purging files since you downloaded that episode 1 on my 6-year-old computer and nearly collapsed my system. It took me 8 hours, Ashlyn, of dumping old copies of files yesterday to get enough room in my database.
Well, you are technically inept. You're lucky that you have the little talent that you have, because you'd be somewhere void of participation in this project otherwise.
So, you're saying I have a little talent?
No, that you're inept technologically.
Aren't most of my contemporaries inept?
I'm your contemporary.
That's generous of you. 2 compliments in one session. What are we talking about tonight?
Lies. All lies.
Yes, lies. Stories we tell our whole lives that are embellished with lies. Do you do that?
No, I don't tell lies.
I'm talking just altering sections of a story, beefing it up to accommodate an audience. You do that, right?
No, I don't do that.
How about bringing something else to a story, like perhaps from another story? Do you do that?
No.
I propose that we all do this in our lives. We alter a story and stick with the story forever. I'll give you an example from high school. My high school. Not yours. You're younger. You tell me the embellished parts of the parts after I finish, okay? So anyway, I'm 15 years old, so we're still on bicycles, right? And I'm riding around with my friend Rick and a bunch of other guys. And we're riding around in various spots. We stop and smoke a joint. And, it came to a point where we had calculated that we smoked 14 joints and we had 5 bowls. So that's a lot of smoking pot. Of course, it's not like pot like now. It's a lot different. I didn't really smoke pot in those days. Still don't. But it seemed like the right thing to do at the time. So we're all on this bicycle ride, and we're riding around town, and we're getting to certain places and then, taking risks. For instance, jumping off the bridge into the water. But, it was a low enough bridge so you didn't die. But there was a good chances of us getting injured to see who could get closest to shore and still be, it was really stupid stuff like that. So we traveled to, we got the bright idea to go to a friend of ours' house, Kristen's house, and she has a ping pong table in the cellar. And now we're really too high, much too high to play ping pong. And all of the follow through on our shots, with the paddle is finding its way to the lights. And we really thought that was great to smash the lights in her cellar until her father threw us out. So then we went over to Sue's house, and of course Sue's there with my mother's good friend and her husband, and their parents, right? Sue's parents are there. And, I suddenly get really hungry, like extraordinarily hungry. And we're in the kitchen, and they're in the living room, and they're playing cards. They're playing bridge. My parents love to play bridge. They used to play with these particular people. And so we're there, and we're very loud, and they know something's up. I mean, it was ridiculous. But I got so hungry, I opened the refrigerator, and I took a whole pint of blueberries, and I lifted them above my head and just started gobbling blueberries, and they were going all over the floor. And, of course, we got kicked out of there. But we decided to sleep on the front lawn at Sue's house. That seemed like the right thing to do, right? Just 11 o'clock at night, sleep, woke up the next day, my bicycle home. So that's my story. So let's talk about that story.
Well, I mean, if there's embellishment there, I'm going to say that you weren't riding bikes. I've never seen you ride a bike, and I don't think you can.
That's inaccurate. We were riding bikes, and I do ride bikes. I just don't ride them in dangerous areas in the middle of the parks with the dangerous trails like you do.
I've never seen you ride a bike around town either.
Oh, well, I keep it on the QT. I don't let people know that I'm riding a bike, but I do ride a bike quite a bit, in fact.
All right. Well,
so
beyond
that's not the lie.
I mean, 14 joints. Even back then, that would be a pretty expensive afternoon for a bunch of kids.
No, that wasn't the lie. That was the real part. 14 joints and 5 bowls.
So let's see. Sleeping on the lawn?
You got it. Bingo, sleeping on the lawn.
Filler, right?
Other guys slept on the lawn, but I didn't sleep on the lawn, but I was embarrassed that I didn't sleep on the lawn. So when I told the story for the rest of my life, which I've told it 5 or 6 times, I always kept that part in because I was a mama's boy and I got myself back home and I didn't want to make my parents worry about me. And I got home and I got in my own bed. Those guys were a mess the next day. They slept on the lawn. One guy slept in the driveway. It was just a mess. So that's my little story. And you picked it out. It took you 3 tries, I have to note, though. And I do ride a bicycle. That's not accurate.
Okay, I was picking on you when I brought up the bike.
I'll give you another example. Okay, it's a little later in my life. I'm 23 or 4, and I was fishing for a living. I was a clam fisherman on Narragansett Bay. And I had a great friend, Bill, who we worked together all the time, and he's still my great friend. And he said one day, "Would you like to go camping?" I said, "Sure, that sounds great. Let's go camping." He said, "Well, why don't we bring our," at the time, we referred to the women as girlfriends. I think that's probably a common term still. But they were both, we were dating. Each of us were dating women. So those 2 women, we asked whether they would like to join us. And the idea was to go out to work for the day on the Narragansett Bay, bring all the gear with us, including the tents and all the poles and all that stuff, food, drink, and bring all of that with us and then sell out on the bay. There used to be a buy boat. We could sell our catch for the day. And then we would go over to Prudence Island and set up camp, which we did. Very, very good. Successful to this point. Bill's Eagle Scout, so he had it all figured out. And I didn't have to do much, but I went off and I caught a nice big striped bass. So we were able to, we were going to have a really good meal together, and it's going to be fun. So we start the fire, and immediately the DEM shows up, and that's the environmental management group of environmental police. They showed up, and they said, "Well, you cannot camp on this island." I said, "Where can we camp?" They said, "No, none of the islands are permissible to camp." But I have to note that I think you have a record for camping on islands in the state. Don't you, Ashley?
Well, I've camped on many of the islands. I don't know if it's a record. I'm not aware of anybody else who's attempting to camp on all the islands.
How many islands have you camped on? Quietly.
Quietly camped?
Yes. I assume quietly because you didn't get thrown off like we
No,
did.
let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8.
Very good. Nice. So we pack up all the gear, and we think the night's almost over, but we managed to get to a place called Adams Point. It's right near Rumstick Point in Barrington. And at high tide, it's an island. At low tide, it's a peninsula. So we set up on the northern end of the what is the island, because there was a high tide at that time. And we built a fire. And we've kind of worked way behind the 8 ball, so we didn't get to eat. We begin the drinking. And things, become, the fire gets bigger and bigger, and it's time to go to bed. We just gave up trying to eat anything and said, let's go. So we had separate tents, and we go off into our separate tents and do our thing. And then I wake up at dawn, like I always do, and I look out, and I hear, and I can see boats passing by, close to shore, though. Very close to shore, curiously. And they're passing by, and they're talking aloud and pointing at me. And, I looked down to see if I had any clothes on, but I was fully clothed and everything. And I looked behind me, and we had burned the entire north end of the island down. Everything, all of the grasses, all of the trees, I presume all the wildlife, gone. Absolutely gone. So we packed up the tents, and put them in the boats and got the heck out of there. That's story number 2. Let's examine this story.
Okay. I'm going to say, having once started a forest fire, that in the telling, much more of the island burned than actually burned.
That is not true.
Okay. So let's see, what other details? The location, maybe?
No, the location was solid. You were closer the first time.
You burned down more of the island than you told in the story. That wouldn't
No,
be an embellishment, though.
We actually burned less of the island than it was. But that's the fun part of the story. That's the part of the story that everyone laughs about, but also feels a little uncomfortable about. Particularly.
So I was right. You burned less of the island.
But you said more. So
No, I meant like in the telling, you burned more than actually was burned.
Oh, I see. Yes. Okay. Okay. Yes.
Right.
That's true.
I mean,
So you had it right on the first time.
Only because I have a story somewhat related, and the more it gets told, the fire was bigger than it actually was.
That's true. So you do tell lies.
I mean, I'm not telling lies per se. I think that
It's
embellishing.
It's part of the story that you actually developed, and it progressed to a point where it's embellished.
Okay, but in my case, as a narrator, I would say it was extremely unreliable because when I set the forest on fire, I was 5 years old.
Yeah, that's an unreliable resource. Yeah, a source. Can you tell a story at this time? Not that one, but a story, any story.
I mean, I can give you that story if you want that story, since we're talking about fires.
Okay, tell that story, please.
Well, I was hanging out with my best friend and next-door neighbor, Zach, and we decided we would have a nice little campfire, and there's a ravine behind our houses and a stream that separates our backyards from, I don't know who owned that land, but there's another side of the ravine on the other side of the water, and there's a little sort of plateau. So
Bullshit. No, just kidding.
perfect place for a fire. We had Kool-Aid and
Whoa.
lit a nice little fire. And then, we didn't clear any of the leaves and stuff out of the way when we did it. So, of course, it started spreading, and then we tried to put it out with the Kool-Aid, and we tried putting the Kool-Aid container into the stream to get more water.
I think Kool-Aid's an accelerant.
Anyway, so the story goes from there that my sister, who was 3, who was always like a tag-along satellite person, alerted my mother in, 3-year-old speak. So it took a while for her to get across to my mother that we were, in fact, burning the woods down.
Can I ask this? Were you regularly sent out to play in the morning with like a pack of matches at 5? Or was it just part of the toolkit?
We weren't sent out with the matches, but we had access to matches.
Was there any like serious parenting going on? Were they monitoring what you were doing, or is it just let it ride?
This was 1970. Nobody watched their kids. They sent them out the door and said, "Come home for dinner."
Absolutely. It was 6 o'clock, 7 o'clock in the morning. Get your breakfast. Out you go. Dirty ankles all day, right?
Yeah, nobody knew what we were up to. Anyway, in the end of this story, I don't know if it was my mother who called the fire department, but the fire department was called by somebody. But in the meantime, my mother took the garden hose and was able to essentially put the majority of this fire out.
Right.
So that when the 7, and that could be an embellishment, there were a lot of fire trucks. Came.
7 fire trucks came? There must have been a cat in the tree.
Anyway.
What town did you grow up in? It sounds like, it sounds a lot like Catanquit. Okay. You know what I'm going to do? I'm going to read a poem tonight. But first, we need to recognize our sponsoring businesses and organizations with a special commercial break. Well, this podcast is sponsored by Catanquit Country Club, where we don't take tea times and where you can wait an hour to tee off. Surrounded by friends smoking cheap cigars, Catanquit Country Club offers free restrooms, no-nonsense bar service, and the best burgers in town if you eat red meat. The greens are green all year round thanks to our reuse of reconstituted wastewater. The restrooms are free. You can flush twice, and if you do, you may be assisting in watering the 9th green. We're also sponsored by Mallory's Electric. We offer complete automated generator installations, all for the price of a small car you may have bought in 1999. Be prepared for the next big one with Mallory's. Mallory's moon tide occurs every 28 days. Don't you remember that? Be ready, be prepared. Call Mallory's Electric. We keep the lights on and the pumps running. We're also sponsored by Sal's Skunk Removal. Do you have skunks living beneath your outdoor shed or outdoor shower? Call Sal. He'll take the stank from your pet skunk. Sal doesn't kill them. He traps them and removes their stinky glands and returns them gently to your yard. Sal's skunks have been seen beneath the tables at local restaurants, eating scraps of food, at local fundraising events, viewing artwork, and swinging on the swings of the playground. Call Sal's Skunk Removal. It's the socially acceptable way to handle your stank. And we're also sponsored by Catanquit Convenience Store. We've been rolling hot dogs for 12 years. Our microwave pizza's the best. Within a third of a mile of our establishment, you can eat here and get gas. Ashlyn, this poem that I'm about to read is entitled The Smell of the Shape Now, and it really doesn't have anything to do with lies, which is the topic tonight, but I just kind of found it and loved it because I was looking through all those documents because I have so much in my database is so crowded. Okay, so it's called The Smell of the Shape Now. Oh, no, it's not. It's The Smell of the Shape of Now. That's the title. We rolled down the hill at Ross's Rose Garden in early May before the blossoms show, when greens and reds forecast crimson through shiny leaves. Momentum lost, we stop at the base of the hill, grass stained and smelling of soil, our backs firmly grounded in moist turf. Skyward glance to white, intermittent, puffy clouds, the ones that never threaten. Sun-blocking story clouds illustrate blue canvas amidst billowy objects. Ah, Abraham Lincoln's long face and beard, attached to Da Vinci's hand of God. Lengthening, guiding fingers hold the president's neck gently. My childhood dog Missy floats gently past, changing shape. The collie lengthens, becomes a dachshund, the dog that my parents gave to a friend. She shed too much. I ask, what do you see? And she says, everything and nothing. She says, I like the smell of the shape of now.
I like this poem. You cross senses with that last line, smell and shape. One could think of a shape as a visual observation or even tactile, as a shape can be handled and, of course, smell. It's luxurious in the latter parts of spring when the mud is up.
I wasn't aware that you like poetry. I'm seeing another side of you, Ashland.
I'm not just a pretty face and a pile of curls.
I hear that.
Here? Do you mean see?
Crisscrossing senses. It's fun. Where are the lies in our lives? Why is it good to identify them and then let them go? Don't you think that's a good idea? I read a lot of fiction, so my writing's essentially all lies. I'm continually presenting characters and situations that, while they're grounded in some experiential truth from the past, they're thoroughly embellished and twisted to accommodate the story I'm telling.
How do you begin?
I think of a story. I kind of return to that child in the tree that I told you about in the episode 1. Sometimes I think for days. Sometimes a single line I overheard at the coffee shop will prompt a story. I sometimes create an outline for the story on paper. I never go by the outline. It's too confining.
I can see that about you. You need the digressions. Nothing's really linear for you. Nothing's logical. You're not a pragmatic kind of guy, are you?
I actually rebel against pragmatism. Society is the problem, Ashlyn. Everyone wants the neurodivergent to accommodate the pragmatists. I suggest that you all might be better served to drive down a different road once in a while when heading to work. You might find something on the side of the road that people are throwing out that may be useful to you.
That's a metaphor, right?
Okay. I have a Meyer lemon tree that I bought. I placed it in a nice ceramic planter and fed it every couple of weeks. Plenty of water, lots of water. It was 12 inches high. 8 months later, it's 7 feet high, and it threatens to grow too high for the room. Its earliest spring, the ones with the darker leaves, are crisscrossing and they're weird looking. A single shiny leafed stalk rises to the ceiling. I hesitated to trim it, though. I don't want to shock the plant or change its shape. But I have to in order to make it conform to the room. It's a delicate balance, this living in the world thing. I like the Meyer lemon, all gangly and shiny-leafed and awkward. You see?
You'll never get lemons if you let it grow wild, though.
You prove my point. You're focused on the practical, the output, the monetary lemon savings we might have in the future. I like lemon with my fish. Well, I'm much more interested in the indirect path.
Yeah, I've taken a lot of different pathways while I'm mountain biking. I almost drove my bicycle off a cliff last week.
And why didn't you?
Death, or the avoidance of death.
That's right. Good choice. Logic. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, logic and pragmatism is okay, but sometimes when your life is in danger,
Do you know that I have to learn stuff that you do every day, automatically? I have to learn it again, over and over every day. It isn't easy being me in your world.
I think it's time for a commercial break.
Well, it's time to pay the bills. We have a couple of commercials here because we are brought to you by none other than Salient Hardware. We have more than nuts and bolts. We're a full-service hardware store. Come in and get a massage. Call friends in China or India for free. We do complete oil burner restoration if you bring in the oil burner. We serve free popsicles on days when the temperatures exceeds 100 degrees Fahrenheit, but donations are recommended. Our staff members always say, "Have a good one," as you leave the facility, or your money back on all items. I don't like that policy. We're also brought to you by Katunquit Carnivore Caterers. We do it all from pig roast to weenie roast to chuck roast. We haven't met a meat we don't like. We slaughter all our animals on site at your home, gut and clean, butcher and prepare. Our meat rubs are made from the finest spices coming out of South County, Rhode Island. We build a pit on the site and we'll even chop trees down and use your own wood to fire up the meal. We don't provide silverware or any utensils of any kind. We advocate caveman, cavewoman eating styles for our carnivore experiences. Call us for your next dose of cholesterol fun. Disclaimer, notice, this is a disclaimer. Katunquit Carnivore Caterers is not responsible for persons experiencing on-site preparation, poison ivy oils in the food and in the air during the fire. Driven in the air means potentially high for on-site tree removal options. Your guests may experience scratching and itching and burning of the eyes. We're also brought to you, it sounds like a wonderful experience, doesn't it, with the carnivores?
I can't wait to hire them.
Yeah, I'm going to hire them right up. Yeah, but we love them, though, because they bought it in here, yeah. We're also looking at Janus Stables. Janus Stables, local stable. Ride with us on Thursday nights. Our multi-directional horse ring creates a rodeo-like atmosphere like no other. It's more like crisscross at the Crash Raceway. You'll be thrown by the experience. I love how they included that word, thrown. And we're also, this is a new one. Hey, folks, the Katunquit PTO. Parents and teachers working together to eliminate typos. We work to create a better experience for your child and your child's educator. Typo-free for 7 years.
So, James, aren't you going to read a story that was submitted by a podcast listener?
Oh, yeah, it was. He lives on another island in Narragansett Bay. Receive a lot of mail from people that live on islands, curiously. He's in a writing group. I'll read it for him. It's entitled Suffering Souls by Dasimus Das Simulis. And, I can't imagine. He may have a pseudonym here. I'm not sure. But he did put in the nickname of Das, D-A-S. That's a cool name. And I like Simulis, too.
It's an unusual name.
Well, he might be Greek, right? But who am I to say?
Possible.
Suffering Souls by Dasimus Das Simulis. I'm a new member of the senior citizens writing organization known as the Suffering Souls. The Suffering Souls are led by an elderly woman named Rayon, R-A-Y-O-N, who suffers from fibromyalgia and memory loss. She once was a radio writer-producer. The Suffering Souls meet at a park in town at Tuesdays, 9:30 a.m., before the noon meal at the senior center. During the summer, we meet at the park, and upon the arrival of the first cold day, 74 degrees, I presume, we will return to the back cramped room at the senior center. Rayon asks us periodically, when she remembers, to place some prompts in the wicker basket that she carries around for prompt deposits. I'm usually the only one that remembers to write prompts. However, Rayon never chooses my prompts. I presume that my handwriting is so poor that she can't read my script. Note, while at Suffering Souls, I use a laptop, and that seems to disturb some of the members. So I tend to sit at the far end of the picnic table, standing once in a while to relieve my aching back, as I'm only 10 days out of surgery for a herniated disc. Well, we wait for 2 more members to arrive. One woman named Edna, who is sitting directly after me on the bench. She's approximately 80 years old, seemingly lives some of a privileged, nice town life, summers only, but that's the only conjecture on my part. Seated between Edna and the wizard, Rayon, is Donna, a longtime acquaintance of mine and the wife of a sport-playing friend that I have competed against and with over my lifetime of sporting adventure. Seated across from Rayon is a well-represented woman, likely in the first part of senior citizenhood. Well-dressed, somewhat of an accent, but I'm not sure where she's from. She may have traveled of late, just a hint of British accent thing, perhaps Dutch. She's tall and slightly overweight, round face, and she announces upon re-entry to the group, "I've been in Greece, we stopped in London and Paris, not in that order, and, oh, well, it's been hectic." We'll call her DR. I never caught her name. I, of course, cast a number of assumptions about this woman as I prep my area and energize my mouse. The other women review their last entries into the loose-leaf folders. Seated directly to my right is a waif of a woman. Let's call her Jenny. I also never heard her name, as hearing is on my list of things to get checked after my spine heals. She announces early on that she's deaf and reads lips and that her hearing is poor, so I adjust my seat to accommodate her handicap so that she can hear or at least see me. She fumbles with her papers and continually finger combs her thinning hair as she says, "It is my first time. I don't know what to do." "I don't know what you do." Rayon waves a scrap of paper in the air and says, "I read these prompts, and you write whatever you want, and then we read them. No criticism is allowed, only good stuff." The group agrees. "Yes, only positive reinforcements," Donna insists. I nod my head to Jenny in agreement and assure her it's a piece of cake. The first prompt came forward as Rayon announced it. "It's time to begin. Tell us of a game you love to play." My rather mundane response is similar to the others in the group. I remind myself that it isn't a contest. The tall, refined DER had a great response about games we play, games she plays with other women in their language, and the absence of words that have meaning. Wow, nice. I like it right away. She has a flow to her writing, and she's educated, and there's some poetry in her writing. Suffering Souls, number 6, my first entry. I enjoy the web of a good Scrabble game with my friend James. He challenges me to such a degree that I will scavenge for words from the depths of my brain to test this wordship. We begin traveling together with our wives as they were best friends, and of course their husbands were responsible for acquiring a friendship. It wasn't difficult to befriend James. He's highly educated, yet he never flaunts it over another person, yet he has a superpower. Scrabble came to us while we were visiting our favorite poet, Lisa Novosad, at her hotel in Block Island. James won the first 7 games. We were staying in a suite of rooms atop the large bed and breakfast that she and her former husband, Rusty, had rebuilt from an old grand structure approximately 20 years ago. The rooms were titled at each door. Ours was the Poe room with a grand balcony. End of 3-minute prompt. So I was going quite conventional with my response, and Edna, seated right after me, told of her love of canasta and some interesting characters that were Polish. Antonia Krawiecki, who, as she summarized with that required that a game of canasta be played each evening without fail. I loved this section of her work and praised her for this. All good, right? Rayon wrote quite childishly about her favorite game when she was 10. The stories seemed to repeat with her as her memory of things that happened prior to her father's untimely death when she was little, when things were okay, before his death, and life was good, and Burl Ives was considered a fine singer, twist their way into all of her work. The second prompt. She reads, "The feminine demonic." Collectively, the group's foreheads scrunched. They squirmed in their seats. We were all less than comfortable with the prompt. My response. The solstice brought low tides that year. It was the time of broad advances of mudflats and a time of discovery when one can broaden their understanding of what is beneath, the sort of feminine understanding of the demonic reaches beneath the harbor's storied waters. I begged her to join me on a walk that day, but she objected vehemently. She didn't want to join those venturing into the heat. She'd prefer to play canasta, and as it was Thursday, she needed time to prepare. But after much cajoling, he forced her to make the walk to the beach, then the rocks, and then to the expansive mudflats. She took her first steps and sank in the mud, never to be seen again. Well, DR was up first. She jumped right in with wonderfully erected senses, lovely prose, and I can't remember what she wrote, but it was sinister. When it came to my turn, I read the above passage. When I finished the words, "never to be seen again," Edna, who I had borrowed passage from her last work, the passage that I so liked and made encouraging comments about at the conclusion of her passage, stood up and walked out. She mumbled something about not knowing what was said and that Rayon hadn't enunciated the prompt appropriately, and she walked away. I called out, "It wasn't me. I was just offering, or maybe let's call it borrowing a bit of your piece because I liked it so much. Please come back." The group called for a return in virtual unison. Some among the group suggested that Edna didn't have a car and that she was walking off without a clue as to how to get home. But she raised her keys in her hand and said, "I'd have to be pretty stupid to leave without a car in the lot." And she walked out of sight. All the Suffering Soul writers were aghast. "Was it me?" I asked. DR said, No, it couldn't be. She's going through some emotional times right now." "I thought I was praising her by including the segment in my piece," I said. Rayon said, "Well, let's move on. Demonic feminine is the next prompt." Not sure of the prompt this time, as Rayon never realized that she repeated the same prompt from the same scrap of paper laying near the basket, yet the Suffering Soul writers began writing despite the error. I rarely write from a prompt anyway. I reject structure. I pulled us one out of a weird place. Here's the next response. I saw her from across the dance floor from the bar area where I was attempting to acquire the attentions of the bartender. She was dancing with her friends, while her friends were dancing with their drinks in hand, something I never understood to be productive. A drink in the hand inhibits the dancer, limits range of motion. After all, aren't we responsible to interpret the music with our movements, to transform the dance floor with delight, and slay the dragon each time we set forth to dance? She danced without a drink and twirled freely, as a result, spinning, her arms drifting like Sheba, the temptress, her hand movements above the head like a belly dancer, without the belly part. I hurriedly left the bar area. My drink order was already in with the bartender, but I left him short and danced my way through the throng to the gaggle of dancers to be nearer her. She was breathing fire, a feminine demon, a temptress, a goddess. I explained to the group that the dancer was my wife, and that this was the moment I fell in love with her. DR announced, "You'd better leave now and go home to dance with your wife." In the next prompt, Rayon interjects, seemingly disturbed by the commentary about my piece. I guess it was too sultry, too sexy. And she lifts a scrap of paper from the basket and almost yells, "Include a favorite lyric from the favorite song in a paragraph." I wrote, "I don't know what's right from wrong. Your twisted love calls me home. And when you cry on the telephone, my loving vows turn to stone. I awaken with your thoughts, not mine, your words divine. Take me to the rest areas, and then long-awaited visits, the unexpected places. I don't understand your complexity, your depth of understanding of me, so I take your words like a thief and awaken you. As the days gently pass, I forget your raucous laugh. Time is moving, it's moving fast, as time has seemed to pass. But you paralyze me with your words." Well, I blew the dust off the suffering souls with this one. The ladies were sitting jaws wide open uncomfortably. I announced, "Some of these are my lyrics," and they further swooned. I adjusted my seat and then stood up, as the doctor doesn't want me sitting for more than 30 minutes at a time, and their heads raised in unison, even Rayon's, who doesn't often hear what I read, as she purposely sits at the far end of the table, directly opposite me, as if I'm an opponent that she needs to keep at arm's length. DR was noticeably stricken, a young version of the others. She repeated, "Leave now, go home, dance with your wife." Rayon asks the time. Donna announces, 11:30. Rayon grabs her slips of paper with used Scrabble prompts and places them back in the basket, tosses her pad and pen in as well, as do the other members of the group, preparing to leave, as if an unsaid prompt was delivered in a tone I couldn't hear. Rayon announces, "Salisbury steak today at the senior center. We're almost late." The women collectively leave, racing from the Shell parking lot, each of them in their own cars, exceeding the 10-mile-per-hour park speed limit.
Wow, he really captured the essence of his writing experience with that group, don't you think, James?
He certainly has.
I think,
This Simoulis guy's got some skills.
yeah, I think it was funny.
I didn't hear you laughing. What part was funny? I think it was tragic.
You think it was tragic? Which part did you think was tragic?
I don't think this Simoulis was What was his name? Simoulis? Yeah, something like that. Das was comfortable enough after his experience with Edna to eat at the senior center. He missed the Salisbury steak. That's the tragic part.
That's the tragic part? Well, you'll have to ask carnivore caterers to make a tray of Salisbury steak for us next time we meet.
I might be staying off the carnivore caterers, but I mean, I shouldn't say that. I think everyone should go with carnivore caterers. Right on. They're good. Right. You have to prompt the...
Okay, but do remember that no food is allowed in the studio.
I do remember that. Well, that's all for today. We enjoyed visiting with you today. From Ashlyn Komorick and James Allen, it's bon voyage and bon dia from the whole crew here at Katunquit. Join us next week when we explore the island fantasy with a special guest that will make you wish you'd never heard such interesting stuff, and it'll force you into trauma therapy. Not really.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. And goodbye. and don't let the door hit you in the butt on the way out, Ashlyn.